Yes, good evening. Good evening,
Yeah,
sir.
that's
Good evening, sir.
okay now. That's okay now. Yeah, that's okay.
ഹരിസാറെ സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യാമല്ലോ?
ഓക്കെ സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്യാം. അനഘയാണ് പ്രയർ.
ഓക്കെ റീനു സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്തോ.
Okay, sir. Okay. To accomplish great things, we must not only act, but also dream, not only plan, but also believe. Good evening, all. Today, Mahatma Gandhi University, School of Gandhian Thought and Development Studies, in association with Center for Yoga and Naturopathy and KG College Pambadi, is organizing a webinar on rereading Salt Satyagraha after 9 decades. With immense pleasure, I welcome all dear guests to this meeting. I welcome Anaka from School of Gandhian Thoughts and Development Studies for the bhajan.
वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही अजे पीर पराए जाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही अजे पीर पराए जाने रे। पर दुखी उपकार करे तो ये, पर दुखी उपकार करे तो ये मन अभिमान नाने रे। वैष्णव जन तो तेने कही अजे पीड़ पराए जाने रे।
Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Anaka. I invite Dr. C.R. Harilakshmendra Kumar, coordinator of Gandhi Lecture Series, for the welcome speech.
Good evening to all participants from Kerala, and good morning to Professor Vinod Kool and Professor Rita Agrawal. We are gathered here to commemorate the 92nd anniversary of the historical Salt Satyagraha. The Salt March, also known as the Salt Satyagraha or Dandi March, was an act of non-violent civil disobedience led by Mahatma Gandhi. The 24-day march lasted from 12th March 1930 to 6th April 1930. Today is also 6th April. As a direct action campaign of tax resistance and non-violent protest against the British salt monopoly. Another reason for this march was the civil disobedience movement needed a strong inauguration that would inspire more people to follow Gandhi's example. Gandhi started this march with 78 of his trusted volunteers. The march spanned 239 miles, around 385 kilometers, from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi Beach, which was called Navasari at that time, now in the state of Gujarat. Growing numbers of Indians joined them along the way. When Gandhi broke the British Raj salt law at 8:30 a.m. on 6th April 1930, it sparked large-scale acts of civil disobedience against the civil laws by millions of Indians. We are commemorating that historical civil disobedience movement. Today's program is inaugurated by our esteemed Vice Chancellor, Professor Sabu Thomas, and this program is chaired by the versatile singer, Professor Dr. Biju Lakshmanan, and our keynote address is given by Professor Vinod Kool, and a special address by Rita Agrawal, and our co-organizers is KG College, Kuriakos Gregorius College, Pambadi. Let me invite our esteemed director, Professor Biju Lakshmanan. He has taken the charge of the director, School of Gandhian Thought and Development Studies last year, and he's organized a large number of programs, academic extension programs till date. And I am taking this opportunity to welcome Professor Vijay Lakshmanan to chair this lecture program. Welcome you, sir. And the inauguration is by our esteemed Vice Chancellor, Professor Sabu Thomas. He is now, till now, he is in the office of Mahatma Gandhi University. Sabu sir is muted his mic. I think he is hearing. Yes, sir. I am taking this opportunity to welcome our esteemed Vice Chancellor, Professor Sabu Thomas, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Our key speaker is Professor Vinod Kool. He is the Emeritus Professor of SUNY Polytechnic Institute, USA, since 2017, and he was the Professor of University of Wisconsin. He's visiting Professor of University of Oregon, and he is rather than a voracious reader and a writer of a lot of books on Gandhi. He was also associated with Mahatma Gandhi University as a Fulbright Fellow in late 2015 and late 2016. And he also gave the keynote address of the inaugural function of Center for Yoga and Naturopathy. Okay, I'm taking this opportunity to welcome esteemed Professor Vinod Kool. Sir, please. Welcome you, sir. Special lecture is given by Rita Agrawal. She is also a voracious reader and a writer of a lot of books. She is from Varanasi. She is the Executive Director and Professor of FNT PG College, Varanasi. And she had a lot of works on his credit, co-authored with Professor Kool. I am also welcoming you, Madam, for this session.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Then our co-organizer is the Kyriakos Gregorios College, Pambadi. I'm also an alumni of the KG College, Pambadi. I'm welcoming my friend, Lieutenant Renish, sir, Assistant Professor and IPSC Coordinator of KG College, Pambadi. And also I am I'm welcoming all the professors or teachers, faculties and students, research scholars and all gathered here for attending this program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I welcome Dr. Vijay Lakshmanan, HOD, School of Gandhian Thought and for the presidential address.
Good afternoon, all. Professor Sabu Thomas, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Mahatma Gandhi University, Professor V K Kool, Chief Guest of this webinar, Professor Rita Agrawal, key resource person key speaker of this webinar, Lieutenant Renesh Joseph, KE College, Pambadi, Dr. C.R. Harileshmendra Kumar, the coordinator of this lecture series or seminars of School of Gandhian Thought and Development Studies, and the participants, scholars, research scholars, students from KE College, and dear friends, good afternoon to all. And we are organizing, the School of Gandhian Thought is organizing a series of lectures and webinars as part of the 150-year celebration of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. And today's program is organized by the school in association with the Center for Yoga and Naturopathy of Mahatma Gandhi University and KG College, Pambadi, which is a co-associate of a series of programs organized by our university. I think all of us are very much familiar with the significance of this day. That, it was in this day that in 1930, Gandhi broke up the salt law by making salt from seawater. And this, what is called the Dandi March or the Salt Satyagraha, is a historical struggle in the sense that a large number of women participated in this movement. And it is also the biggest mass struggle, non-violent struggle organized by Gandhi in India. And this struggle shows the power of non-violent direct action as a tool for fighting imperialism. And Gandhi used this tool, or that is Satyagraha, as a tool to fight against imperialism. And as part of this struggle, a large number of a series of non-violent struggles were organized in different parts of India. And it is also interesting to show that a movement that started in Kerala also, from Calicut to under the leadership of Kerala. And this Salt Satyagraha has historical significance, and also it has more relevance under the present context also. And we are facing some sort of new kinds of imperialism, and therefore, in this context, we have organized. We are rereading the Salt Satyagraha after 9 decades. That is the theme of this webinar. And I think the key speakers will discuss the whole aspects of the relevance of this in this topic. And in this words, I invite the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University, Professor Sabu Sir, for inaugurating this seminar. Sabu Sir.
Very good evening to all of you. Probably early good morning to Professor Vinod. He must be joining from the United States. And my dear friends, Director of the School of Gandhian Thought and Development Studies, Professor Viju Lakshmanan, Professor Harilakshmi Kumar, Professor Vinod Kool, Professor Rita Agrawal from Varanasi, and Lieutenant Renish Joseph, and all the distinguished scholars, friends. Vinod, I have lots of friends in the Polytechnic Institute in New York. They are very active in nano and polymer research.
I know that.
Yes. A lot of good friends, working in nano area. And Rita, I was several times in Varanasi, in the BHU. We have lots of cooperation with the BHU. So I've been to BHU several times. Yes, so fantastic places. I'm glad that Professor Kool and Professor Agrawal are giving very important lectures for this meeting. Dear friends, the Gandhian philosophy, Gandhian thought are getting lots of momentum across the globe. We all know that Director Professor Viju Lakshmanan and Harilakshmi Kumar suggested very clearly that Gandhi fought the British with 4 important weapons: the peace, non-violence, civil disobedience, and truth. These were the 4 weapons used by Mahatma Gandhi. The whole world surprised. Gandhi was inspired by so many people. When I went to South Africa, I was listening to a talk of Mandela many years ago. Mandela was giving a long speech in a big crowd. My collaborator took me to Mandela's speech. I think it was in Durban. During 2 hours talk, he quoted at least 20 times Mahatma Gandhi. I was excited being Indian attending his lecture. Einstein was inspired by Gandhi. Desmond Tutu was inspired by Gandhi. So many people were inspired by Gandhi. You travel any country in Europe or United States or Japan, wherever you go, you can see Gandhi mark, Gandhi statue. So Gandhian philosophy has attracted very much to society. And I'm glad that the School of Gandhian Thought and Development Studies, they're organizing a series of symposia. Congratulations to Harlishmendra Kumar. He's organizing a large number of meetings, and Dr. Biju is giving a good leadership. Every year we organize a large number of meetings. And today, the title of the topic, Rereading Salt Satyagraha After 9 Decades. Dr. Biju said Salt March or Salt Satyagraha, then the March, these are all different names for this non-violent movement. And probably we all know that the British controlled the salt monopoly during the British regime. And as Dr. Biju indicated, a large number of women participated in this meeting and completely non-violent. And I understand that there were only 78 volunteers of Gandhi participated, but there were lots of women also attended. And 239 miles from Sabarmati to Dandi. It was something like 24 days march. 12 March 1930 to 6 April 1930. That was a real period. That gives a lot of energy, a lot of momentum for our independence struggle. And the philosophy of Gandhi is gaining a lot of attraction. And Gandhi showed that by peaceful ways one can attain the freedom. That is what the whole world actually surprised. And I'm glad that Professor Kool has kindly agreed to be our keynote speaker. And Professor Agrawal has agreed to be agreed to give the special address. And we are looking forward to your lectures. And I hope that Hari and Biju will organize a series of seminars and symposia. Dear colleagues, I like symposias, meetings, conferences, because this is a very important way we can interact, we can network, we can collaborate. I remember my first interaction with SUNY Polytechnic was when I organized a meeting here. A couple of people came from Polytechnic, and that was a starting point of interaction. Then that we built a very good collaboration. Therefore, meeting symposia give a lot of opportunity to interact and network, and you understand the latest advancement subject. And I congratulate the school for organizing such a meeting. With all your permission, declare that the Rereading Salt Satyagraha after 9 decades has been inaugurated, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you,
I
sir.
wish you a very good brainstorming discussion meeting today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable words. Today, we have a special guest for delivering the keynote address, Mr. V K Kool from USA. He is working as a lecturer in the subfields of psychology in interdisciplinary context, impact of technology, nonviolence, and human development. He is also having many faculty positions at several universities in US and abroad. He is the Director of Ministry of Education and Social Welfare, Government of India. With immense pleasure and due respect, I welcome Mr. V K Kool to have the keynote address. So, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me well? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You are audible. You are audible.
Dear Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Sabu Thomas, Head of the Department, Dr. Biju, Lieutenant Joseph, faculty, students, Dr. Hari, and guests. When Dr. Hari invited me, I was surprised to know that he hasn't forgotten me during the last 6 years when I had come to your place. as a Fulbright scholar. And then I looked at the resume of your Vice Chancellor, who has done fantastic work in chemistry. I was very impressed. So besides this temptation to speak at this Gandhi event organized by your university, I thought I will say hello to your Vice Chancellor as well. So greetings to all of you from Los Angeles, California. It's very early here in the morning, and it was not difficult because webinars make our life very easy. I didn't have to dress up like your Vice Chancellor, who had to take all that trouble, and you guys. I just changed my t-shirt and just sat in front of my computer. So webinars make our life very easy. The only caveat is that it is very early in the morning and I still sipping my first cup of tea. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak to your distinguished audience. I remember the good work of Dr. Hari and Dr. John Mulakattu at the center when I visited Kottayam a few years ago under a Fulbright assignment. I do remember the yoga conference that Dr. Hari organized and have fond memories of the beautiful city of Kottayam, your warm hospitality, and my interaction across a wide group of students and faculty at the university. On this special occasion, when we are reflecting on Dandi March, I'm sharing with you some of my thoughts on the surreality of what happened on that day about 92 years ago. Whenever I showed this segment of Dandi March from the movie Gandhi made by Lord Attenborough to my students in USA while teaching a course, no one believed, and I repeat, no one believed that it would have happened. For it was impossible for the American students to believe that this much extraordinary self-control could be demonstrated by an unbelievable mass of people in the form of organized non-violence in the face of extreme brutality. It was never heard of in the history of humankind. But Lord Attenborough had presented it so succinctly. As regarding my work on Gandhi, it is mostly limited to the understanding of psychological underpinnings of his life and work that we have been conducting for about 5 decades. So it's almost 50 years of our work. It began with questioning Milgram's research, one of the most widely referenced study on violence in the history of psychology, in which 98% of his participating subjects agreed to deliver electric shocks to the erring learner on a simple task. Can you believe 98% people agreed to deliver shocks for a simple task, for a very simple task? This is our propensity to violence. You can assess how violent are we. However, a few among his participants, they refused to obey him and did not deliver shocks as instructed in his experiment. But Milgram continued to ignore them. He didn't study them and made no attempt to find out how they had remained non-violent. At IIT Mumbai, where I was teaching during the 70s, I began to question the findings of Milgram. Since the publication of Harvard scholar Erickson's book, Gandhi's Truth in 1969, we have not been able to find any comprehensive work on Gandhi in the domain of psychology. So people studied his behavior, but nobody looked into the mind of Gandhi, except this Erickson's book, Gandhi's Truth. It was a very superficial analysis of Gandhi's mind. His behavior in political context, in social context, and all that was very well studied. But who was Gandhi? What was he thinking? What was his cognition? What was his emotion? What was his perception? So that's what made us interested in looking at Gandhi, because who were those people who refused to give shocks, whereas 98% people were giving shocks? So it was an undiscovered area of work in psychology, and we felt that something must be done about it, and to figure out why some people in the Milgram's study remained resolutely nonviolent, ignoring all the temptations from Milgram. While contemporary scholars such as historian Ramachandra Guha, who is very popular in India, and others have been writing on Gandhi and even inviting controversy on political platforms. You might know that he had to leave his position at Ahmedabad University because of his controversial statements. But as far as myself and Dr. Rita Agrawal are concerned, we have remained, listen to this carefully, we have remained empirically committed to the growth of the study of nonviolence as a science, like chemistry, physics, and something like that. Similar to University of California, Berkeley professor, Michael Nagler, who has also contributed chapters in our books. Leading social scientists of the world, such as Galton and Kenneth Boulding, have also argued for the establishment of the science of nonviolence. And how I wish a university center in India takes lead in establishing a center for the study of science of nonviolence at a department dedicated to Gandhian studies. To the best of my knowledge, there is no department of Gandhian studies which specializes in this field. As I told you, there was only one book by Erickson, and then books came from us. So it's a very open area of research and understanding. Dr. Rita Agrawal has been working with me in this area for over 4 decades. Recently, we have published 3 books in 2 years. That is from 2020 to 2022, the last 3 years. And these publications have been made by globally renowned publisher Macmillan. Currently, she is based in New York, and she will tell you more about our work on the science of nonviolence and its applications. To understand Gandhi, you have to learn to live like Gandhi. Can you understand your religion without practicing it? No, you can't. Just as you self-experiment with your religion while understanding it, Gandhi also believed in conducting his self-experiments freely and conducted that before he could tell others what they should be doing, he needed to examine himself. In this context, I will report an incident narrated to me by late Chief Justice Dharmadhikari, a close associate of Gandhi. He was in his late 90s when I met him at his home in Mumbai in 2017. He gave me an example of a villager who was very sick, and he came to Gandhi after traveling almost 60 kilometers, some by walking and some on the bullock cart and so on. Gandhi listened to him and then told him to come back after 60 days. In the meantime, Gandhi asked his number of close associates and physicians if there is some remedy for this illness. Doctors had mixed opinion. Some said do this, some said do that, and all that. So Gandhi experimented on himself. And he believed that it is the salt that was the basis of this man's illness. Because those days, Britishers had taken away all our wealth, and people hardly have left with salt and bread. And that's how he started that salt movement. So only salt and bread was left, and salt was also taxed. So anyway, after 60 days, when this villager came back to Gandhi, he said, please don't take salt or reduce it intake. At this point, villager became very angry, and he started abusing Gandhiji. And he said, you are a namesake Gandhi. You don't do anything except, talk. You made me travel 60 days knowing I was so sick. But he could not understand that only self-experiments teach us the virtue of things around us and train us for a better life to understand ourselves. He couldn't understand that. Gandhi tried to convince him, but he was so angry that he didn't listen to Gandhiji. In order to understand Gandhi, and this is what I believe, a group of experts from a wide variety of disciplines need to collaborate. It includes dedicated professionals from social sciences, management, education, biological sciences, medical sciences, educationists, environmentalists, social policy makers, and more. While our work for the past 5 decades had been mostly in the domain of psychological underpinnings of the life and work of Gandhi, we have always tried to empirically and scientifically link Gandhian philosophy with issues related to technology, environment, man-machine interaction, artificial intelligence, including Turing testing and cognitive computing, educational practices, community living, and social work. Religious and moral practices, post-Darwinian view of evolution, including exaptation, not adaptation. Adaptation is an old concept, including exaptation, neuroscience and neurotransmitters, and conflict resolution. For examples, you will find chapters in our books on the role of chemical messengers, such as oxytocin and vasopressin, in conflict resolution. Gandhi neurons, regulating empathy in our brain, managing cognitive computing and artificial intelligence in the current fourth technological evolution that we are facing, but so far only finding our inability to deal with it. And the work of Nobel laureates such as Daniel Kahneman and Thaler in behavioral economics being already preempted in the life and work of Gandhiji. On this occasion, I intend to tell you that our talk is cheap. Let's walk the talk. Therefore, if you find me of any help, and I repeat, if you find me of any help, Mr. Vice Chancellor, I assure you to offer my services free of cost, no charges, in an honorary capacity for developing and supporting your mission of the Gandhi Center and establishing links nationally and globally. I feel the pain in my heart when I read that not even one Indian university figures in the list of top 150 universities and colleges of the world. But Gandhi happens to be the former President Obama's moral man of the previous century, Albert Einstein's finding Gandhi illuminating his mind, and a leading scholar of intelligence at Harvard University, Professor Gardner, who has written wonderful books on intelligence, devoutly wishing himself expanding his own intelligence and cognition by being like Gandhi in any proportion. So we have this gift here rooted in India. If your university takes lead in this matter, you are going to set a unique example in not only research and academic success, but also you would be cogently demonstrating Gandhi would remain so important for us during the millennium. In addition to the traditional thinking about Gandhi's life and work, which I noticed being carried out in dozens of institutions in India, our current advanced task is also to find out how he was far ahead of his time. He was very far ahead of his time. Modern India must continue to explore his trajectory in grappling with the issues raised by two evolutions, biological and technological, independently and both in our interaction, and while challenging and exasperating the tranquility and harmony among people and things around us. I wish you success in all of your efforts and request you to spread the message of Gandhi to make our world a better place to live in. Thank you once again for giving me an opportunity to address you on this occasion. I find your center has done tremendous work. In fact, when John Mulakattu was there, he was editing the most prestigious journal on Gandhiji, the Gandhi Marg. Nothing comes close to this journal, and he was the chief editor at that time, and I think for the last 10 or more years, he's continuing to be the editor. So you have set a good example, because from your department of Gandhian studies, you gave a message that the best of the best journal was being edited at your university. I'm so proud to say this. And recently, John contributed a chapter in our book, which Dr. Rita Agrawal and myself has published, Gandhi's Wisdom. She will tell you more about it. She has worked with me for more than 4 decades. She stayed with her husband in Varanasi, a well-known businessman over there. She would have gone to Harvard or Stanford or any place, but she preferred to remain with her family. Currently, she's in New York, and she's better off 3 hours ahead. So she's in a good time to speak, around 10 o'clock her time right now. Mine is almost 7 or something, 7:15 here. So I think you have more energy regained to speak. So I invite you to speak. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you, sir, for your words. Next, we have a special address by Ms. Rita Agrawal, the ex-director and professor, FMT, HCPG College, Varanasi, Uttar Pradesh. She was nominated as a national level expert for the Global Fund for Fighting AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. She has published over 90 research papers in peer-reviewed journals from USA, Japan, Canada, UK, and various journals of American Psychological Association, and presented at international and national level conferences. I invite Ms. Rita Agrawal to have the special address. Ma'am, please.
Thank you very much. Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir. Respected Director, sir. Professor Biju Lakshmanan, Professor Hari Lakshmi, all the faculty members, students, and friends. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity of presenting some parts of our work, which Professor Kool and myself have been able to do over the last 4 decades. As Professor Kool has just pointed out, India has this vast treasure of Gandhiji, his life, his work, and the practical examples that he has given us for the practice of nonviolence. We just have to take it forward. And as he has very rightly pointed out, we have to walk the talk. Seminars help in disseminating the information, but beyond that, we must do something. So I now would like to make a presentation of some of our work that we have been doing over there. Are you able to see the presentation, sir?
No, ma'am.
Hello?
No, ma'am.
I see a part of something on the right-hand corner. I can't see it. I can't read it. Yeah. But you can read it out if you want to.
I'll just see if I can get this done. Can you see it now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Is the slide clear?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you, sir. So this is what we will try to focus on today as to how the Dandi March gave us many, many lessons in self-control for the practice of nonviolence in turbulent times. While India has been somewhat slow in establishing and using Gandhiji's mandates, I was surprised to find a recent article in the Scientific American. In fact, it was published on March 1st, on how the pandemic of the COVID exposed us to the myth of rugged individualism. It showed us that we are not self-sufficient and independent. We have never been. Our fates are bound together. Taking care of others is taking care of ourselves and committing ourselves to upholding our evolutionary mandate to help one another. Not just the people we see every day, but everyone, everywhere, is the only thing that will save us. So it took this terrible, tremendous pandemic to show the world that we have to help each other. The US cannot remain with itself, India cannot remain with itself, China cannot remain with itself. And what was surprising is that over 1 century back, one person, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, realized this evolutionary mandate. He not only realized it, but he practiced it in the form of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That every person, everything sentient in nature is part of our world, and we must take care of everything. You will be surprised to learn that what Gandhiji practiced over a century back is substantiated by modern empirical evidence. That there is this evolutionary mandate, we have to help each other. We cannot remain individualistic. The empirical evidence comes not only from psychology, but as Professor Kool pointed out, from the neurosciences, from economics. You see it in the form of many, many other sciences holding on to this evolutionary mandate. And one success story of this belief is the Dandi March. A little bit about the Dandi March. As we all know, it was called the White Flowing River. The reason being that all the people, the 78 trusted followers of Gandhi with whom he started this, were all wearing white khadi. See, this was another example of how he not only believed in Gandhi, but everyone who was working with him used his mission to get the village to go forward by wearing khadi. And if we look at what Gandhiji said one day before the Dandi March started, he said, "We are entering upon a life and death struggle, a holy war. We are performing an all-embracing sacrifice in which we wish to offer ourselves as an oblation." So you see that he took the people along with him. I think we should focus a little bit on why he took up salt for this Dandi March? Well, we all know that salt is an essential part of our nutrition. Without salt, if the body is low on sodium, it not only goes into a coma, but it can also pass away. So life and death focus on salt. Moreover, salt is something that each of us consumes to the last man in the world. And as Gandhiji always focused on Antyodaya, the Akhri person, the last man, so he took up something which was near to all our hearts, and that is salt. And as you know, one day before the march, 50,000 people gathered to hear Gandhiji speak at Sabarmati Ashram. And when he started the next day, with 78 of his trusted followers, including some women, thousands joined him on the way. And everywhere he went, from Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi near Navsari, a span of 385 kilometers covered in 24 days, people not only heard him, they gathered in thousands and they joined him. And on 6th April, 1930, Gandhiji picked up a lump of salty mud, saying, "With this, I am shaking the foundations of the British Empire." He then boiled it in seawater and made salt, which was illegal, thus breaking the Salt Act. So you see how with a simple piece of salty mud, he did not use a sword, he did not use guns, he did not use bombs. He was just using a lump of salty mud to shake the foundations of the British Empire. And we all know that he was able to do this. At the same time, the march raises a number of questions. First of all, why did Gandhi choose this mode of protest against the newly enacted salt tax? Why did he decide to march this long distance? He could have done many other things. Second question, why was he so sure about its success? Did he not know about mob mentality? That when even a small group of people can turn into an unruly crowd? Why was he sure that these thousands of people would not become unruly? They would remain disciplined till the end. Why was he so sure that he would not vent their anger and frustration at being taxed for something essential? There is only one answer to all these and many more questions. The answer is Gandhi's truth. And what was this Gandhi's truth? It was his creed of nonviolence and his trust in people to be nonviolent. He had this immense trust that basically people are nonviolent. We just have to prime them. We have to get it out of them. And they can be easily convinced. Let us now look into a little bit about Gandhi's truth. Let us try to understand what was Gandhi's truth. As we all know, people from all over the world have been not only convinced by Gandhiji, but have used his principles, his philosophy for liberation from many types of people all over the world. In fact, Dr. Martin Luther King, one person who was heavily influenced by him, delivered a historic address to the largest psychological association of the world, the American Psychological Association, at their annual convention in 1967. And at that time, in 1967, he challenged us as social scientists to play a more active role to help eradicate racism and other forms of heightened social tumult. This was when? This was 1967. As Professor Kool pointed out, we have one book by Erik Erikson, Gandhi's Truth, published in 1969, which took up the psychological underpinnings of Gandhiji's philosophy and practice. But thereafter, there has been very little work. So far so that noted psychologist Murray and his group of colleagues have pointed out as late as in 2014 that while there have been some efforts to develop a psychology of nonviolence, and it is very gratifying to see that he mentions Professor Kool's work, and the American Psychological Association has had a division of peace psychology since 1988. But the potential for contributions of psychology to the study and practice of nonviolence has been largely untapped. At the same time, he points out that the possibilities, however, are exciting. So in 1967, Martin Luther King pointed out to the American Psychological Association that they should do something as social scientists. So many years later, even in 2014, not much has been done. We, of course, had been working all along, steadily, steadfastly, and it is very gratifying to note that between the years 2020 and 2022, we were able to publish 3 books, and these are the covers of those 3 books. What went into it was more than 4 decades of research, discussion with scholars, and most of all, interviews with family members of Gandhiji and close associates of Gandhiji. I was fortunate enough to talk to Gandhiji's granddaughter, Mrs. Kulkarni, in Bangalore in 2016. And noted scholar Nagindas Sangvi at Bombay again in 2016. I was able to meet the person who was whose father was a very close associate of Gandhiji, Niranjana Kalarthi from Bardoli, where one of the first Satyagrahas was conducted, and the slogan of Bardolized India was heard even in the British Parliament. Her father, Niranjana's father, was a very, very close associate of Gandhiji and Vallabhbhai Patel. And we were able to visit Bardoli. Professor Kool also visited Bardoli. Professor Kool was able to interview other family members, another granddaughter of his. And through all of this work, we were able to take the books forward, and the result was these 3 books. Again, they were very well received in the domain of psychology. We have one of the reviewers, Prof Johansson, deputy editor of the Journal of Resistance Studies in Sweden, saying that this is obligatory reading for anyone who wants to understand how the Gandhian experiments with truth have developed into the most important force in societal conflicts globally. He says, when you read them, you will achieve a more nuanced view on Gandhi and nonviolence than you can imagine. Thank you, Professor Johansson, for this wonderful review. Similarly, Professor McNair, past president of the APA Division of Peace Psychology, has also reviewed our work and says that the books cover a wide range and depth of coverage. And it is a must read for everyone who wants to be familiar with Gandhi or who wants to be well versed in peace psychology. Sir, I'm not trying to praise my work, or our work, I should say, but this is just a small beginning, and we hope that this will inspire people to take the work forward and for Gandhian centers to continue with more seminars, more webinars, and more work. Now, going back to Gandhi's truth, why did Gandhiji have this intense belief in Satyagraha? We all know the event at the Peter Maritzburg station, where he was thrown out of the first class compartment of the train in which he was traveling. This was his first experience of oppression, of though he has had a first class ticket, he was not allowed to travel in the first class compartment simply because he was a non-white. On that cold, stormy day at the station where he was thrown out, sitting on the platform, he took his decision that he will stay back in South Africa and fight. I should not use the word fight because non-violence does not include fight, but he would struggle to show the British, to show the white, that what they were doing in exploiting the natives and the Indians was not correct. Later, his period in jail in South Africa and his reading of Ruskin's Unto This Last helped him to refine his philosophy of Satyagraha. Going on with his history, we see the first Satyagraha in South Africa in 1906. Unfortunately, it failed to accomplish its goal. But like Thomas Edison also said when he was asked what did he learn from his failures, Gandhiji also learned a lot. And the next Satyagraha in 1914 was successful, and he was able to get the Indian Relief Bill passed. How was he able to do all this? It was his willingness to observe, improvise, and to commit to a new strategy. He was constantly evolving. When I was talking to Naginda Sangvi, that is exactly what he said, that people like Gandhiji were always evolving. And that is why Gandhiji called his autobiography My Experiments with Truth. He was constantly experimenting. Professor Kool pointed out one experiment of his, but if you read his autobiography, every day was an experiment. And he did not ask anybody else to do anything unless he had first tried it out on himself. In a way, what was he doing? He was deifying truth. For him, God was not the truth. Truth was God. So this was what led to this intense belief in Satyagraha, being a force which is born out of truth, love, or nonviolence. If we try to understand Gandhian nonviolence, there are a number of influences on Gandhiji. Starting from his parents and early childhood experience, especially his mother, even the person who looked after him, who first brought him to Ram, who told him that whenever you are scared, all you need to do is chant Ram Ram. And we know that till his last moment, Gandhiji did not leave his chanting of Ram Ram. It all started from his nanny in early childhood, who had taught him this. Then his exposure to all the religions of the world. He was a devout Hindu, but he took from wherever he could He read the Bible, he read the Quran. He was very, very influenced by Jainism, by Buddhism. And we see all the influences in Gandhiji's life and his philosophy of Satyagraha. There were also people such as Ruskin, Tolstoy, Thoreau, Raichand, who influenced him. So you see people from different walks of life, from different parts of the world. The way he took them in, maybe that is what we need to do, to take everyone into our fold and draw good from wherever we see it. That is the only way to learn, and that is how Gandhiji learned. I have just pointed out some of the events and circumstances which influenced him. The event at Pietermaritzburg, his first period in jail, the various satyagrahas, and many other events and circumstances. All of these led to what we can call Gandhi's truth. There is no better way of understanding Gandhi's truth than through the words of Gandhi himself. He says, or he writes, what is truth? It is a difficult question, but I have solved it for myself by saying that it is what the voice within you tells you. This is important, what the voice within tells you. It is your inner conscience. You are not saying that something is truth because somebody else is saying it is true. You have to be convinced about it. And Niranjana Kalarthi at Bardoli pointed this out very succinctly to me. Before the Satyagraha in Bardoli, a large number of villagers went to Gandhiji that we want to start a Satyagraha in Bardoli. But he sent them all back. And he said, go back and think whether you really want to do it. Don't do it because I am doing it. Don't do it because the Champaran Satyagraha or the Khera Satyagraha was successful. Do it only if you are convinced. And only when they came back to him a week later, he told them, okay, if you are convinced, now you should go to Vallabhbhai Patel, who resides near Bardoli, and he will help you on. So this was the first and foremost thing about Gandhi's truth, that each person who follows Gandhiji must be convinced from within that it was correct. Why was this truth so compelling? Why was Gandhiji able to convince everyone? Because he was appealing to values held universally. Values of love, empathy, and compassion, and most of all, to that inner voice, that voice within you. For Gandhiji, truth should be the very breath of our life. There was nothing else for Gandhiji except this truth. And as Murray and his colleagues have put it in 2014, nonviolence is not a garment to be put on and off at will. Its seat is in the heart, and it must be inseparable part of our very being. So we don't take up nonviolence because we think that it will help to resolve the conflict. In fact, many scholars of nonviolence, such as Jean Sharp and Galtung, have pointed out that we can think of nonviolence in two ways. First, as a pragmatic, or what they would call pragmatic nonviolence, and the other is principled nonviolence. Pragmatic nonviolence is when we take up nonviolence to resolve a conflict and then forget about it. But Gandhi's nonviolence was different. It was principled nonviolence. It was a principle that he followed every day. It was the breath of his life. It was not a garment to be put on and off at will. So much so that he felt that politics cannot be separated from the other domains of life. He was fighting for India's independence. He was struggling for India's independence. He wanted India's independence, but through the use of nonviolence. This is what has been called the spiritualization of politics, something which is very, very needed today. In fact, according to Gandhiji, all social action has to be governed by a single set of moral values. What were these moral values? First of all, selflessness, to think of others before ourselves. Secondly, non-attachment. Thirdly, non-violence. And fourthly, active service. Constructive activity formed a very important part of his non-violence. He engaged in it, and this is what is needed today. That we have to do something in our own small way to improve the society, and that is the active service part of it. That is the selflessness part of it. And if we are able to give up something, a parigriha, that would become non-attachment. And together it would form non-violence. According to Gandhiji, there were 7 core characteristics of his Satyagraha. And it was these characteristics which led to his belief in Satyagraha, and also to the success of every Satyagraha, including the salt Satyagraha at Dandi. The first characteristic is the faith in human goodness. As I pointed out right in the beginning, this is an evolutionary mandate. If people had continued to fight with each other, we would have become extinct, much like many of the species of the universe. But the very fact that the human race has survived is because of the human goodness that resides in each one of us. We have to have faith in this. Why must we look at only the negative parts of man or woman? We need to look at the goodness in each of us. Look at the glass as being half full and not empty. The second is truth. And what is this truth? The truth is the faith in human goodness. The third characteristic is non-violence. That even in the face of violence, Gandhiji said, turn the other cheek around. You're slapped on one cheek. Do not slap the other person. Rather, turn the other cheek around and be sure that it will lead to self-suffering, but be ready to endure it. Creative self-suffering is what he called it. Then Gandhiji focused on both the means and the ends. The end will be good only if the means are good. Today, very often, we look at only the end. Oh, we must get money. Let's get money in any way. No. Gandhiji said, no, we cannot do that. We want development. We cannot do it anyway. We must have a good means, a good way of doing it. And what was this good way? The non-violent way. At the same time, Satyagraha believes in the rejection of coercion. You cannot force anyone to do something. I will point this out later also. If you tell somebody that you have to do this, you will probably face rebellion. But if you can convince the person that he wants to do this, then you get him to be highly motivated and he takes part in the process. And the last Satyagraha, which is important, last characteristic of Satyagraha, which is important, is fearlessness. Abhay. that is what Gandhiji talked of. That if you are following the path of truth, then you do not need to be afraid of anything. There is this fearlessness. But remember that this fearlessness comes only if you are following the path of truth and nonviolence. We must also remember that every social action is not Satyagraha. Just because you are using some form of nonviolence in nonviolent protest, it need not be Satyagraha. It can become Duragraha. And what is Duragraha? Firstly, there is a prejudgment that the enemy is wrong. There is stubborn resistance. Satyagraha and Duragraha use pressure and persuasion in different ways. While the Duragraha uses it to make the enemy make concessions, the Satyagraha uses it to make the enemy see alternative situations. We do not make the enemy seem small and guilty. We do not point the finger of shame on the opponent. In fact, Gandhiji said, whenever I see an erring man, I say to myself, I have also erred. It is our duty to grant to others the freedom that we seek for ourselves. So this was a little bit about Gandhi's truth. Let us now look at self-control. Because how was he? The important question is that he had these thousands of people following him in all his satyagrahas, even in the Dandi March. But nobody was uncontrollable. There was no mob violence. There must have been utter self-control. Let us look at this self-control from the lens of Gandhiji. The success of all non-violent protest is self-control. Because our natural instinct, the first instinct that we have is that if anybody does something violent to you, you react violently. But if you control yourself at that time, you control your anger, then you see that slapping of the other person does not lead you anywhere. As Gandhiji said, an eye for an eye would make everyone blind. So, as the modern psychologist McGonigal has defined self-control, this self-control or utter willpower is the ability to do what you really want to do when a part of you really doesn't want to do it. You want to slap the other person, but you restrain yourself. You show self-control. You show willpower. Self-control can be said to consist of three elements. The first is I will, the ability to do what you need to do. I won't, that is the ability to resist temptation. And I want, your true want, the ability to remember the big picture of your life. It's very surprising to see that Gandhiji was saying much of the same things that the modern psychologist, with all its apparatus and modern statistics and everything else, computers and all that, is saying today in the 21st century. So you see that what McGonigal says today about self-control is what Gandhiji said then. Similarly, the areas of self-control pointed out by Baumeister, one of the most important people, psychologists working in the area of self-control, says that there are 4 areas of self-control: regulation of thought, moods and emotions, impulses, and performance. Was not Gandhi saying the same thing? According to Gandhiji, you had to show non-violence, not just in your acts, but even in your thoughts, in your speech, in your moods, in your impulses. So Gandhiji was preempting so many things that are being pointed out only today. The same psychologist, Baumeister, points it out why self-control is important and what does self-control do. He calls self-control the moral muscle. In other words, you can compare to self-control with physical muscles. Why? Firstly, both give us power. Physical muscles give you physical power. Self-control gives you the moral power to do what you want to do and to withstand or to not do what you should not do or to fall into temptations. Both are characterized by strength and direction. More importantly, both show signs of fatigue. In fact, it has been shown through modern studies of today that there is something called ego depletion. That if you show self-control in one activity, immediately thereafter, you fall to temptation. Good example of this was Navratri is going on. A lot of us are having full day fasts. So all day you are controlling yourself. I won't eat. But the moment you go to break your fast, you binge. The explanation of that is ego depletion. And in fact, there is neuroscientific evidence to point out to this ego depletion. But what Baumeister has also shown, and what Gandhiji understood then, that just as physical muscles can be trained to withstand the effects of fatigue, so also self-control can be trained to withstand ego depletion. You don't have to binge on food. You can be trained. You can train yourself that even at the end of the day of the fast, I will not eat this, I will not eat that, I will not do it. I would like to point out some very interesting facts on ego depletion and how it is being seen in our lives these days. There is a study on politicians. Since they are forced to show so much of restraint and self-control in their public lives, Duvall and his colleagues have found out that they are often unable to resist temptations in their private lives. What is this? Ego depletion. Similarly, there are a large number of studies on judges. It has been found that when they are asked to grant parole to prisoners, this tendency depends on the time of the day. The percentage of granting parole is highest in the morning. It decreases as lunchtime draws near, goes up again after lunch, and decreases thereon. What is the explanation? The physiological basis of self-control. It is related to blood glucose levels and caloric intake. You are able to show self down. See, here you see something for which we have a physiological basis, but Gandhiji knew about it then only. So you see that self-control is influenced by various factors. First of all, by physiological factors. I've just pointed that out. Secondly, as Gandhiji said, by motivation, the inner voice, which provides intrinsic motivation. It is also influenced by cognition, the way you think about self-control. And Gandhiji used this to a very great extent. Today, it is only in the 21st century, with our current work on cognition by Nobel laureates such as Kahneman and Nobel laureate economist Taylor and Sunstein, who got the Nobel Prize just a couple of years back for their work on nudging, that all this is important self-control. Gandhiji used all of them a century back. Isn't this amazing? And said to create a social identity. He used what Boulding has called integrative power. He tried to bring everyone together. You see this in the organization of the Dun. One day he had a prayer meeting so that everybody identified with each other. And that way he could get them to self-control. There are a large studies on number of studies which show that we can overcome through. In fact, a very recent study of 2018 points out that one way of overcoming ego depletion is by looking at some you have the bigger goal in front of you, and that is the independence of India. So why is it a want to behavior? Because he believed in the inner voice. Each person's inner voice was changing this. Can priorities be shifted from the immediate goal to a larger goal, to a more distant goal? Yes, it can be. How can it be done? It can be done by various ways, and Gandhiji used each one of them. When he tied the goals to one's identity, by helping the community, by developing a superordinate category, by developing if-then options. What do we mean by this? You're slapped on one cheek, turn the other cheek around. So you didn't have to think. The person didn't have to think of what to do. And the choice of goal was left to the individual. It was his inner voice. It was my goal. It was not something that you were telling me to do. And you see, through all of these, Gandhiji was able to get self-control, even when modern psychologists are not able to do it. It was his focus on community well-being, Sarvodaya, Antodaya, Vasudev Kutumbakam. It was his use of interpersonal rewards, integrative power of community prayers, spinning, managing the ashram. They all did the work themselves. And it was constructive action, self-reliance and well-being of each and every person in the country. It was not just a political slogan. And how it was motivated by the inner voice. So Gandhiji was able to use all the factors leading to self-control as validated by modern state-of-the-art research and psychology of self-control. Maybe this is what made Einstein say, generations to come will scarce believe that such a one as this ever in flesh and blood walked upon this earth. Is Gandhi's truth relevant today? One may say that it was relevant a century back, but is it relevant today? As Gandhiji said in his own words, it can be used anyhow. It blesses him who uses it and against whom it is used. Without dropping a drop of blood, it produces far-reaching results. It never rusts and can never be stolen. So it is always there. But as Gandhiji also said, nonviolence and truth cannot come by compulsion. It cannot be written into the constitution. They have to be adopted of one's own free will. They must sit naturally upon us, like next to skin garments. And this is what Murray and all have also said. They have summarized it in saying that nonviolence is an approach in life which assumes that truth and love are the most powerful forces in the universe. and that all reality is interdependent, that authority depends on the obedience of those who acknowledge authority, and that means and ends are inseparable. In fact, as Michael Nagler of the University of California puts it, the laws of nonviolence are stronger than the laws of physics. This is what Professor Kool was pointing out to you, that we can have a science of nonviolence, just as you can have a science of physics. And Nagler has proved his point by pointing out to current research in quantum physics regarding the relativity of all objects, both alive and lifeless in the universe. This is what Gandhiji was saying, Vasudeva Kutumbakam. Quantum physics is pointing it out today. So you see the comparison between physics and nonviolence. They're both the same. If quantum physics can be applied to understand matter today, these same principles can be used to apply nonviolence. But what is needed? Nagler, in our recent book of 2022, has pointed out that a paradigm shift is needed from the old story to the new story. And he refers to quantum physicist Henry Stapp by saying that the quantum conception gives us enlarged self from which must flow lofty values that extend far beyond the confines of narrow personal self-interest. Just focus on this. A quantum physicist is saying this. Enlarged sense of self from which must flow lofty values that extend far beyond the confines of narrow personal self-interest. You can all see that this is nothing but Vasudeva Kutumbakam that Gandhiji spoke of. And this is the new story that Nagler writes about, that the universe is not a bunch of material particles, and a human life is not locked into a framework of separateness, competition, and violence. Life is, or is meant to be, a dramatic adventure of discovery of meaning and utility. A little of this awareness would go a long way toward protecting people from conspiratorial fantasies. So it can be applied. And we can see that it has been applied. What does it need? It needs a sound constructive program which will provide scaffolding for a new society, which will balance non-cooperation with cooperation, which will prove the lie of dependency wrong, which would unify diversity, which would build community, and which would train people to live in a non-violent life. And you see it in action today. You see it through Seva. You see it through Sardar Kanya Vidyalaya at Bardoli. There's a small school in Varanasi run by Beena Mishra, who is running a school for children of rag pickers. We have all heard of Bunker Roy and his barefoot college at Tilonia, Rajasthan. Only recently, a person from Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, pointed out the Deen Dayal Research Institute to me at Chitrakoot. And a small teenager from Ohio has got a grant from NASA to replicate the Deen Dayal Research Institute model in the USA. Isn't this wonderful? If the small teenager from Ohio could do it, why cannot we encourage our youth to do it? This is what I would like to see. And I'm ready to help anybody who would want to do it. You see it in mass social action too. In 2011, the Time magazine declared the year 2011 Person of the Year as the protester, to provide eminence to all the people who engaged in non-violence protests all around the world. As Rick Stengel put it, it was for capturing and highlighting the global sense of restless promise. You see the success stories from all over the world. And what is the future? It is that intelligence is not enough. We need to use non-violence and it can certainly be useful. It is as old as the hills. It is nothing new. We can use it to wipe out all the problems of this world. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your valuable words. Now I invite Dr. Rennie Joseph from KG College to give the vote of thanks.
Good evening, all. Respected Chair of the session, Dr. Biju Lakshmanan, Honorable Vice Chancellor Sapu Thomas, sir, Dr. Vinod Kool, Professor Rita Agrawal, Dr. Harlishmi Kumar, sir, dear teachers and students. On behalf of KG College Pambadi, I have immense pleasure to propose the vote of thanks for this webinar. At the outset, let me thank Dr. Biju Lakshmanan, sir, HOD, School of Gandhian Thought and Development Studies, for chairing the session. Thank you, sir. I express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Sabu Thomas, sir, Honorable Vice Chancellor of MG University, for inaugurating the session. Thank you, sir, for your valuable presence. And we are very thankful to our chief guest and resource person who graced the occasion with his enlightened words and presence. Sir, it was really an honor to listen to you. And I also thank Professor Rita Agrawal, who delivered the special address. Thank you, ma'am, for shedding light on the relevance of Salt March and Gandhian ideals. And our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Harlishmi Kumar, sir, who is the coordinator of Gandhi lecture series, and to all the participants, including teachers and students. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Professor Kool, do you have any plan to visit India?
Yes, both of us will come.
I'm just waiting for your invitation.
Okay, we have plan. Okay.
Use me, abuse me, misuse me, whatever you want to do. I will be at your disposal. Okay. And I'm very fond of Sadhguru, and I would like to come and visit him someday during March festival or something. Me and my wife are great fans of Sadhguru. So, of course, you are not very far from there. So we'll definitely come, but first your invitation should come to me. And I'm very impressed by your Vice Chancellor. His credentials are great, and I'm sure he would encourage you and provide you all the facilities for great work. So it's that much
You have visited our department with the invitation of Professor Mulekar.
Pardon? Say it again.
You have visited our department with the invitation of Professor Mulekar, John Mulekar.
Yes, I know. Yes. And he is in touch with me. He has written a chapter in our book, and it has been praised by a number of my colleagues.